depreciate that time. But this time, from 2008, the exchange rate of Asia currency is relatively stable. So we come to the BRICS currencies, also show the same trends. During the crisis period in 1999, a lot of BRICS currency depreciated. However, during this period of crisis in 2008, a lot of currency of BRIC nations appreciate. The reason may be the same thing as the capital inflow. Just inside about maybe the carry trade or something in Brazil. Here is a short retrospection of or the evaluation of the China exchange rate regime. Here I just trying to estimate the de facto exchange rate regime change before and after the reform. Here we can find after the reform, the yearly change of exchange rate or the volatility of exchange rate became higher. That means the RMB exchange rate have depart from a hard peg to US dollars. However, when the crisis came, the data shows here also repegged to US dollar again. And here I also trying to calculate the possible currency basket of RMB by the OLS method, just like the Franco in the Bay. And here's the result. After the reform and before the crisis, the weight of US dollars in RMB currency basket is account for maybe 84%. But when the crisis came and RMB repegged to US dollar again, the weight of US dollar in RMB currency basket is increased to 90%. And also I'm trying to estimate the floating band of the RMB exchange rate. After the reform, we can find that it's gradually in the first year, the floating band is about 2.5% a year. In the first year. In the second year, it's increased to maybe 5%. In the third year, was increased to 10%. That means the RMB exchange rate became more and more fluctuate. However, when the crisis came, the floating band is very limited to 0. That means hard peg to dollar. Here is the estimation of the exchange market prices. We can find it is to my surprise when I have the calculation, when I have the estimations. We can find that after the reform, when RMB pegged to a currency basket rather than US dollar, the exchange market price became higher. That is somewhat to my surprise. And however, there must be some reasons. The reason is maybe here, the transaction between RMB and the US dollar account for 91% of the total volume of foreign exchange transaction on China's interbank foreign exchange market. However, that means RMB exchange rate should be pegged on US dollar by about 91%. But the US dollar weight on RMB currency basket is only about 84%. It's much lower. So it is the reason that why after the RMB exchange rate regime reform, the exchange market price became higher. So my conclusion is here that it is reasonable for RMB to peg on US dollars. Yes. Here's the last thing is also the conclusions. The policy suggestions in the conclusions. And I think here is, even though the situation among BRICS are different, however, the key challenges are almost the same. That means the policy incentive, the inflation pressure, capital inflow, for example. However, the capital inflow will result in currency appreciations. And the currency appreciations will result in more capital inflow again. On the other side, the domestic inflation pressure coming from the crisis policy and the capital inflow will result the currency depreciations. So that is an opposite tendency. So what is the final conclusion? The final conclusion is the tight domestic policy is needed, now aiming at containing inflation among BRICS nations, I believe. And the second line is make exchange rate stable or peg on dollar to prevent capital inflow and inflation. And the third one is there's no more important effect of exchange rate on real economy. Actually, the indicative guideline of G20 have already shifted partially from exchange rate to real indicators of internal and the external balance, like domestic demand, the domestic credit, public debt, and the balance of payment, rather than exchange rate. Systematically significant countries in particular. And the fourth conclusion is fiscal policy will be more important under the pegged to US dollar regime, under the fixed regime. And we need to put our eyes on the possible public debt issues. And the last conclusion is, if we appeal to some policy coordination among BRIC nations, I believe from experience of Eurozones, from the experience of the Asia, when trying to cooperate in terms of the exchange rate, something else. The first thing is to set up a policy surveillance, a regional policy surveillance mechanism before we can coordinate macroeconomic policy. Thank you.
Well, I think we had, in relation to this whole seminar, this is one of the most difficult subjects and the most problematic subject, as we have heard from our panel of experts. My first comment, I think it's, when we look at what Professor Moreira has brought us concerning the whole picture of how countries have been reacting in the last years after the crisis, we can see the difficulty on the subject, on the discussion, because all our countries around the world, and especially those BRIC countries, are having problems that are related to, in great part, to the world crisis. So discussing some kind of concern policies, more integrated economic policies during a period like that is always much more difficult than in other periods. But as Moreira has also presented us, the change that the world have come, since we had the Asian tigers and Latin America being at that time a very controlled and precise economy with no flexible policies, I think also shows that, things in economics change quite significantly in not a very long period. When we heard the appeal, and I would say that Professor Monti was appealing as an African and as a South African. South Africa has been worldly known for the dream, and the dream that came through with integration of a society. I think this is very important as a goal, as something that we should look forward. There are a lot of political problems that have to be surpassed by that. But the main point, I think, is that, as Professor Sun just finished his presentation, is that we have to have coordinated policies if we want to achieve anything as some kind of integration. I just like to remember that in Latin America, we have been dealing for many, many years with Mercosur, and one of the main problems in the economics integration of Mercosur is that most of our countries have very, very difficult economic policies, and when we take the two main ones, Brazil and Argentina, you know, have been going apart in economic policy for very long. So it's very difficult to work on more integration, economic integration, when economic policies are different. And I think the final conclusion of Professor Sun shows us, you know, the way that we should look forward. Just to finish my brief general comments and leave for our panelists to comment on the others' presentations. I think it's very interesting to remember, and Márcio Garcia has remembered that you know, Brazil has a very, very unique situation at the moment. I think that to consider that part of our success is true, but also we have to understand that Brazil has, and very different from all other BRIC countries, and taking a little bit on the subject that Márcio said that is one of my special subjects, is that Brazil has a long, long tradition of inflation. And with a very complex situation that is our indexation scheme that has gone on for more than 30 years. So when you look about the main problem of the Brazilian economy, which is a very, very high interest rate, that has to do also with those different characteristics. So I think the lesson that we can take from, at least a simple lesson from this very interesting debate and those wonderful presentations, is that each country has its own specific points and problems, and they have to be addressed. Of course, in a world when the most developed country of the world has a very bad fiscal policy, has been inflating the world, this is also makes it very difficult for the discussion. But now I'd like to open for the table so that some of the panelists may want to make comments on their other presentations. Márcio, you want to be the first?
Yeah, okay, I'll make a quick comment. Our finance minister became famous by talking about currency war, and certainly we need some coordination regarding the exchange rate regimes. And in that respect, I hope that our South African friend is right, and regarding what the